The highway is a ribbon of asphalt wrapped around the throat of America. For most, it's a path to someplace else, a place of normalcy, of routine. But for the Iron Riders Motorcycle Club, the highway isn't just a road, it's a sovereign state, governed by a code few understand, and even fewer dare to live by. They wear their three-piece patches like medieval crests, proclaiming their sovereignty outside the sterile confines of civilized law. And their code? The rule that vanished. It was a cold, hard rule, forged in the grease and grit of forgotten principles. Never let the innocent pay the price for the wicked. Never stand by when the wolves descend upon the lambs. And right now, the rule demanded blood. The current trouble wasn't a rival club or a drug turf war. It was something far uglier, something the law was too slow or too blind to catch. A predatory loan shark operation run by a slick, low-rent criminal named Victor the Hook Hayes, who specialized in shaking down the elderly and single mothers, pushing them out of their homes over bogus debts. The president of the Iron Riders, a man known simply as Grizz, was the keeper of the code. Grizz wasn't built like a CEO. He was a granite wall of muscle and scar tissue, his face perpetually set in the grim determination of a general who knows his men are outnumbered, but never outfought. He sat in the dim light of the clubhouse, the scent of stale beer and exhaust fumes heavy in the air, studying a photograph. It was a picture of an old woman, Eleanor Vance, smiling gently on her porch, surrounded by potted geraniums. The Hook was taking that porch, and everything under it. She paid them 3 times what she owed, legal or not. Grizz rumbled, his voice like gravel scraping against steel. The paperwork says one thing, the truth says another. The law tried. The law failed. That means it's off the books now. Around the scarred oak table sat his senior officers. Ghost, the vice president, a shadow of a man whose eyes missed nothing and who carried the calm demeanor of a rattlesnake coiled for strike. Hammer, the sergeant-at-arms, a brute force of nature whose loyalty was as thick as his neck. And Stitch, the club secretary, a man whose quiet intelligence belied the savage loyalty he harbored for the code. Ghost leaned forward, resting his elbows on the table. Hayes doesn't move without his muscle, Prez. They're running a fortified front in an old industrial park near the docks. Standard procedure: intimidate, seize the property, cycle the debt. They're smart enough to operate just outside federal wire fraud jurisdiction. Local PD calls it a civil dispute. Civil dispute? Grizz sneered, spitting the words out like toxic waste. There's nothing civil about making a grandmother choose between medicine and a place to sleep. The vanished rule doesn't recognize fine print or legal loopholes. It only recognizes right and wrong. He slammed his fist down, rattling the empty beer bottles. Hayes thinks he's untouchable because he hides behind legal shields. Tonight, we remind him what happens when you cross the line in this territory. Hammer cracked his knuckles, a sound like small stones grinding together. I've got the intel on their security detail, Prez. 2 shifts. The main crew rotates out at 2 a.m., leaving the B team. 3 guys, mostly heavy lifters, not fighters. They got cameras, but they rely on the seclusion of the area. 2 a.m. is when the city sleeps and the road wakes up, Grizz confirmed. Stitch, you ensure the club's financial interests are protected. No civilian entanglement, no collateral damage. We hit Hayes' operation, yes, but we also retrieve Mrs. Vance's legal documents and a compensatory sum for the trauma. Stitch nodded, already making notes. The Iron Riders weren't thieves, they were fiscal correctional officers. The briefing lasted another hour, refining the strategy. A swift, brutal surgical strike designed for maximum impact and minimum exposure. It wasn't about showing off, it was about precision. Their violence wasn't random, it was applied pressure, like a blacksmith striking molten iron to purify it. As the clock crept towards midnight, the Iron Riders gathered in the maintenance garage, the air thick with the smell of high-octane fuel and impending confrontation. They were the shadows the city needed, the kind of solution that smells like gasoline and gunpowder, not paperwork and politeness. Each man checked his bike, his weapon, and his resolve. They weren't saints. They'd all done time, spilled blood, and broken countless laws. But when it came to protecting the weak, their code elevated them. They were outlaws, yes, but they were honorable outlaws. Grizz pulled on his cut, the weight of the patch settling on his shoulders. The Iron Rider patch was more than leather. It was a promise to each other, and a silent promise to the unseen victims of the world that justice, even the rough, dirty kind, would prevail. "Remember the rule, brothers," Grizz said, his voice carrying over the throbbing engines. "We are the shield. Tonight, we restore balance. Tonight, we ride for Eleanor Vance." The sound of 20 heavy bikes starting up in unison was the sound of a storm brewing, a mechanical growl that promised retribution. They rolled out into the cool night, a tight, disciplined formation, their chrome glinting under the pale streetlights. They weren't a police force. They were the consequence of a failed one. They were the road justice, and the rule that vanished was about to be enforced. The 2 a.m. mark was approaching fast, and the ride to the docks was a silent, intense pilgrimage toward a necessary violence. Hayes was about to learn that when you hunt the weak, you inevitably run into the strong, especially the kind who ride iron horses and live by a forgotten code. The innocent would be saved, the guilty punished, and the balance restored, the Iron Rider way. The ride to the docks was a silent, intense blur of speed and shadow. The Iron Riders moved like a black tide, their engines a constant, deep-throated rumble that seemed to swallow the lighter sounds of the city. The industrial park was a labyrinth of rusting warehouses and forgotten commerce, a perfect hunting ground for predators like the Hook. As Hammer had predicted, the front, an old, repurposed shipping office, was dark, lit only by a single, sickly yellow security light and the red glare of a few surveillance cameras perched precariously on the corners. Grizz raised his hand, and the line of motorcycles throttled down, their mechanical heartbeats slowing to a low thrum. They parked their bikes strategically, flanking the building, ensuring no escape route went uncovered. The only way out for Hayes' crew would be through the Iron Riders. "Ghost, perimeter breach," Grizz whispered into his mic. Ghost and 2 others, clad in dark, non-reflective gear, melted into the shadows near a corrugated steel side door. They weren't just riders. They were veterans of conflict, their movements economical and lethal. A soft metallic click signaled the successful defeat of the lock. Grizz, Hammer, and the main force positioned themselves at the heavy front door, waiting. The moment Ghost secured the interior, the signal would drop. They didn't have much time. Their justice was meant to be swift, a decisive strike that restored order before the legal world could even file a report. They were the thunder after the law's slow lightning flash. The signal came. 3 quick taps on the private frequency. Go. Hammer kicked the front door with the force of a battering ram, the ancient wood splintering with a sound like a gunshot. They flooded the main room, a makeshift office filled with cheap desks, filing cabinets, and the sickly glow of a few desktop monitors. The 3 B-team guards were caught entirely off guard. One was fumbling for a shotgun racked on the wall. Another was asleep with his head on a desk, drooling onto a foreclosure notice. The third, startled by the noise, stood frozen, holding a lukewarm cup of coffee. "Road justice," Grizz announced, his voice echoing off the concrete walls. "Stand down, and nobody dies tonight but your boss." The guard reaching for the shotgun made his choice. He lunged. Hammer, moving with a speed that belied his size, intercepted him. It wasn't a fight. It was an execution of leverage. A single, sharp impact, and the guard was crumpled on the floor, unconscious. The sleeping guard woke to the chaos and attempted to draw a sidearm from his belt. Before he could clear the holster, Ghost, having circled back, delivered a precise, non-lethal strike, silencing him instantly. The third guard, the one holding the coffee, dropped his cup and put his hands up, shaking uncontrollably. "Where is Victor Hayes?" Grizz demanded, his eyes boring into the terrified man. "Upstairs. Main office. He's always up there," the guard stammered, pointing toward a set of rickety metal stairs. Grizz gave a curt nod to Hammer. "Secure the basement. Find the strongbox and the files. Stitch, you go with him. Find the Vance file." The retrieval of the documents was the primary objective, the physical proof of the code's enforcement. Grizz and Ghost moved upstairs. The office was slightly better appointed, dark wood paneling, a view of the shipping docks, and Hayes himself, sitting behind a polished desk, frantically trying to shove bundles of cash into a briefcase. He was a small man, unremarkable save for the fear that now slicked his pale forehead. Hayes looked up, his eyes darting wildly between Grizz's massive frame and Ghost's menacing silence. Wait, this is a mistake. You've got the wrong guys. This is all legal. Civil proceedings. Grizz stepped closer, his shadow falling over Hayes like an executioner's hood. You call it civil. We call it theft of dignity. You prey on the old and the weak, Hayes. That's a violation of the rule that vanished. Hayes scrambled, pulling a small, ineffective pistol from a desk drawer. Get out. I'll call the cops. The cops couldn't help Mrs. Vance, Grizz said, the disappointment heavy in his tone. But we can. Ghost moved first, disarming Hayes with a swift, brutal precision that left Hayes screaming, clutching his fractured wrist. Grizz stepped past the defeated man and approached the safe hidden behind a fake painting. The combination, Hayes, or we start taking things you won't ever get back. Hayes, broken and terrified, spat out the numbers. Grizz opened the safe. Inside, along with stacks of cash, were numerous deeds, titles, and legal documents. Downstairs, a victorious shout came from Hammer. We got the files, Prez. The Vance file is here, and a pile of cash. Grizz retrieved the compensatory cash and the documents he needed. He tossed a heavy stack of money onto Hayes' desk. This is for the trauma, the displacement, and the disrespect of the code, Hayes. It won't cover the debt you owe to decency, but it'll pay for your mistakes. When the police find you, you tell them the Iron Riders delivered road justice. They didn't call the police. That wasn't their job. Their job was to apply the pressure where the system failed. They secured the retrieved funds and files, leaving Hayes battered, humiliated, and utterly destroyed. A clear message sent to anyone else considering exploiting the vulnerable in their territory. As the first sliver of dawn painted the horizon, the Iron Riders roared back onto the highway, the precious documents safely tucked away. They had broken laws, committed acts of violence, and yet they were the heroes of this grim, dark chapter. Mrs. Vance would get her home back, and the Hooks operation was dismantled. The innocent were protected, the wicked punished, and the balance restored. Grizz looked over his shoulder at the receding skyline. The rule that vanished hadn't vanished at all. It was just enforced by men who wore their honor on their backs, men who understood that sometimes being an outlaw was the most honorable way to be a lawman. They were the Iron Riders, riding into the sunrise, ready for the next time the civilized world failed its weakest citizens.